My name is Netta Higuera, and I'm an attorney at Advocates for Faith and Freedom. We decided to take this case because we believe in the equality of education for all children, and unfortunately, the governor's orders really has a desperate impact on disadvantaged students. And so we wanted to be the voice for those disadvantaged students.
My name is Giselle. I've got 3 kids. Aaliyah is 17, Hayden is 11, and Sia is 7. They're all in the LAUSD district, and there are 3 different startup charters, Valley Charter Elementary, Valley Charter Middle, and Chance Charter High School of the Arts. Maybe I'm lucky, but my kids have always loved going to school. I'm an educator myself, so I think a lot about what kind of academic environment I want them to be in. And they're getting a little bit more used to the routine, but they're not getting more okay with it. They're not happy about it. And, for kids, not only is it something that's fun for them and something they enjoy, it's something that's really, really necessary for their growth, for their intellectual, mental, social, and emotional growth. Their brains are being wired every day with everything that they do. Neurological connections are being made, and things are kind of being set there in the way that their brain functions and the way that they think and the way that they address problems and things like that. And I'm pretty concerned that their brains are being wired in a different way now that they're not doing their usual thing and hanging out with other human beings. Everything is on the screen. Everything is in front of the computer. And they get bored really easily. They're distracted by anything that's going on around them. So I've had to separate them so they're all in 3 different rooms so that they can focus on their own stuff. But at the end of the day, it turns out to be really lonely because they're spending hours on end in a room pretty much alone, other than me, ping-ponging back and forth to whoever needs help. I've had to actually lose my job, lose my career. I've been a preschool teacher for 13 years. It's something that I love doing. I'm pretty sad that I've had to kind of throw that away in order to be home with the kids, because preschools have been allowed to be open this entire time, and daycares, which is a little funny to me when elementary schools can't be open, because I think preschoolers are kind of the ones who tend to spread more germs than others. But anyway, preschool's been allowed to be open this whole time. My school elected to go on Zoom for a while. So for a while I was working from home on Zoom while my kids were doing their online school. That alone was pretty difficult, because even being physically here with them, clearly I was not present or able to help them with any of the things that they needed, whether it's help with an assignment or whether their Zoom is crashing or the Wi-Fi is down. It was really tough to try to balance both of those things. But before this school semester started, my preschool decided to go back to opening in person. And once I heard that LAUSD was not going to reopen in person at all, I realized that I had to completely leave my job as a teacher, because there would be no way that I could leave the kids alone to not only supervise themselves, but also homeschool themselves. So I ended up working a little bit more at a restaurant. I work at a restaurant in Santa Monica on the weekends and at night now, so that I can be home with the kids during the day. And we're making it work, but it's not ideal. I'm home with them while they're doing their schoolwork, and then at night when I have to go to work, they're either staying home alone with the 17-year-old taking care of the others, or they're being pawned off to one grandma or the other grandma. So it's been kind of an inconsistent schedule trying to make it work with the support system that I have. So now that they're not in school, I've left my job teaching. I'm home with them during the day, which is where I need to be. But I still have to put food on the table. I am a single mom. I'm not getting any financial support from anyone. So I've been having to work in a restaurant on the weekends and at night, which means that they're kind of scattered to the wind at that time. Sometimes the kids are at home alone with the 17-year-old who's taking care of the others. Sometimes they're going to one grandparent's house or the other grandparent's house. Because of everyone's different schedules, it's not able to remain 100% consistent, which is definitely not the best for the kids. That's actually one big thing that I feel like we're losing from not being in school too, is just being able to follow a consistent daily routine, which I think is really important for children. I'm getting involved because as a parent and an educator, I want to make sure that we are doing the right things for our children. Staying home, staring at a screen, being isolated, all those things are not healthy for my kids, for anyone's kids, or for this entire generation of children. We started off with schools closing because we were figuring out what was going on. There was a lot of uncertainty, completely understandable. The original intention had been to flatten the curve and slow down the spread so that hospitals wouldn't be overwhelmed and we could take care of people as we needed and as this situation progressed. I feel like we've somehow forgotten that. I'm starting to feel right now like we are trading something for the other. We're trading the possibility of maybe a child spreading the virus to somebody who might be negatively affected, who might be damaged by that. But we're trading that possibility for absolute and certain damage to our children. And I don't think that it's fair to them. We need to take care of our elders. We need to take care of the people who are not healthy, but we also need to take care of our children. We need to take care of the future generation of this country, and we're not doing that right now. Kids are suffering, families are suffering, and none of this is healthy. We need to find a way to move forward. If we have restaurants open right now, I work in a restaurant 5 nights a week, sometimes 6. I'm exposed to hundreds of different people coming in and out every day with their masks off, touching the plates that they've eaten on, and following the guidelines, sanitation guidelines and all of that. We've managed to be open for several months without any problems happening. If we can figure out how to do that, I'm not sure why we can't figure out how to have school open with the kids. Preschools and daycares have been open. They're figuring out how to, use distancing or sanitation or small cohorts or pods to make it safer for children. Why can't we do that for our elementary and junior high and high school kids? Why is keeping restaurants open more important and more valid than keeping schools open?
There's a vast array of difficulties with social distance learning that parents and students and even teachers are experiencing on a day-to-day level. And this depends on what we're dealing with. So for example, a single mom, she's having to work from home and educate her children, especially if they have special needs. That really takes all hands on deck because the mom is not getting the support that she needs through having other people there to help her. And so, for example, that is a huge difficulty for her. How is she going to get her work done and also focus on these kids? And so you're basically in a position where the mom has to make a decision. Does she work to feed her kids, or does she educate them so that they don't get even more behind than they already are? And so that's one of the struggles for a single mom. But then you have a lot of these kids have IEPs, which require assistance, which require people there to help them, and they're not getting that. An IEP is a legal document that sets out the plan for it stands for Individualized Education Plan. And there are a group of individuals who know the child well, the parents, teachers, and school staff, and they create this individualized education plan tailored to the special needs of the child to help them thrive in their education. So the IEP lays out what is needed to help this child thrive, whether it's speech, whether it is an assistant with them throughout the day, or a social plan to where they can interact with other students. And a BII is a behavioral intervention implementation, which specifically targets the behavioral problems of students. So a lot of these students have behavioral problems that interfere with them learning. And so BIIs help address those problems head on.
My name is Kristen Mays. I live in Encino, California. My sons, Chris and Zach, attend Portola Middle School in Tarzana, and this is within the LAUSD school district. My journey as a parent of 2 exceptional children has been a long one, and I've been an advocate for autism awareness and disability rights for some time. And I've served on 2 boards that champion this cause. This is the other part of my life that I'm extremely passionate about. And since the school closures, I had gotten plugged into a parent advocacy group through an attorney colleague of mine who is also involved in it, who specializes in special needs law. And without knowing what's coming, we have no idea what the timeline is. We have nothing to project against, and we've got a union that is out of control in this district. They're bullying these parents. They're not bringing the parents to the table. They could care less about kids with special needs. It's all lip service for them. And right now, in front of the election, they're focusing 100% on propositions that benefit them, and they are putting the needs of children and parents in their district to the bottom of the list. And so as I started to know more about what the union is doing here in the city, the UTLA, and what they really stand for, it just impassions me that much more to fight against this system that is set up to fail these children and to fail these parents. These children deserve better than this. They deserve a union, and they deserve a district, and they deserve teachers that care about them and care about their development and actually follow the law by implementing what is required in their IEP, which they are refusing to do. So my understanding, there's 80,000 children in the LAUSD with an IEP. That means 80,000 children are in the same situation as Chris and Zach. I fear for an entire generation that is going to be impacted with long-lasting impacts to their development. You know, academics aside, that's one thing, but their development is at stake right now. These kids need these services, and the district is doing the bare minimum. And then when I hear that LA County is now permitting, as of mid-September, for small groups with special needs and special service requirements to meet in person, yet the union is prohibiting it in LAUSD, it's really tragic. It's really tragic that the union has put the needs of these children below their politics and their need to push an agenda right now. So that's why I'm involved. I would do anything to support my kids. I would do anything to help other parents that are in the same situation I am, because when you're in this situation, isolation is the worst thing. You're already isolated. In typical times, you're isolated because of this. But now you're really isolated. And I refuse to remain quiet about this situation. These children deserve a voice, and they deserve a right to an education. And they deserve therapies and services under the law. And that's why I'm involved. This entire experiment since March has been, no, it's an experiment.
Oh, okay.
I feel like it's an experiment, a social experiment, since March has been disruptive to their schedule. It's impacted their ability to access necessary services that are required under their IEPs. We've had little to no guidance from the school district in terms of how they intend to implement the IEP in this setting. And the school district has outright denied Christopher and Zachary access to in-person services. So they've adjusted, to answer your question, but I would say that it's not been an easy adjustment. My sons thrive because of their disability. They thrive on structure. Both of my sons are on the autism spectrum, and anyone who is familiar with that knows that structure is very important to their social and emotional well-being. And it's been very, very difficult for all of us. We had a system in place, and at the time of the lockdown, we were in the middle of reevaluating Zachary's education plan literally had scheduled to reconvene for his IEP the week of lockdown, and were unable to do it because the district refused to meet, even by Zoom, by the way. They refused to do it until the end of May before we could reconvene a hearing that was set for March. So, yeah, I mean, there were checks and balances. The IEPs required specific services. There were specific schedules. The kids knew what to expect. They knew who they were supposed to be meeting with. They knew what to anticipate in class. All of that is just unknown at this point. And when it first happened, when I pushed the school for services, their response was, we're in an unprecedented situation and we don't have a response for you. So my attorney filed for the new hearing and made it abundantly clear to them that they have a legal obligation to provide these services. And we got the new IEP signed off. And even still, Zachary was supposed to receive speech services in summer school, which he didn't receive. You didn't receive any speech services, did you?
No.
So, I mean, if it wasn't so sad, it would be comical, but it's really sad because
Was the speech teacher supposed to go into summer school classes?
he was
In my classes for
Mhm.
summer school?
for summer school.
Yeah, we didn't do that.
And I know he didn't do that. So, and we're not getting a set schedule from the district. I'm not getting a response when I push them for an accounting of the minutes they're working with the kids. There's no accountability for it. So that is super frustrating. That's super frustrating for me. I just feel that this whole situation has really created the perfect storm for kids like Chris and Zach, because not only are they not getting the therapies that they need and are legally entitled to, but they're regressing socially. It's impacting their emotional development. So we're just taking it honestly a day at a time. We take it a day at a time, and every day just seems like the previous day. And it's tiring, and we're only into October at this point, but it's tiring. It's tiring for all of us. I need to stay home with my children. They're unable to be here left unattended, so I need to be here to assist and help. I've had to reach out to the regional center for assistance with Christopher, because Christopher has a BII that he is supposed to have with him. And because the district isn't permitting him to have his BII, the regional center has been very helpful in allowing someone to come over and sit with Chris to make sure that he's on task throughout the day. A BII is a behavioral interventionist. It's a one-to-one aid. Because of Christopher's behavioral tendencies that are associated with his autism, he needs someone to help him go through the day and stay on task and support him, help him with communication, help him advocate for himself. It's a critical component of his therapy through school to help support his academic learning. And that person, while he is being permitted to assist Chris, is only being permitted to assist him through Zoom. He is not permitted to come to the home to be with Chris. In fact, Chris has never actually physically met his BII. He's only seen him on Zoom. It's interesting. We're trying to make it work. the BII, he does want to be here, and he's been told by the district he's not permitted to. So we've worked out a system where he communicates to me via text. He's starting to communicate with Chris via chat in the Zoom sessions. And now that we have an extra person here through the regional center, he's communicating with her too. So it's literally a 3-person job just to keep, him focused and engaged to make sure he has access to his education.
Yeah. Do you know much about IEP? What is IEP?
Yeah, I know a lot about an IEP. The IEP is the Individualized Education Plan. Both Christopher and Zachary have an IEP, and the IEP spells out specifically the supports that are necessary for each of them, and that is with the goal in mind for their academic success. So they both have speech therapy services. Christopher has a BII, and Zachary receives resource support. He's in a gen ed setting while Christopher is in a special day setting. But because he's in gen ed, he gets additional resource center support that's spelled out through monthly minutes that the school district is required by law to provide. And unfortunately, that is not happening. It's difficult for them to remain focused and on task. And I've noticed, especially for Christopher, struggles quite a bit with voluntary verbal communication. And I've noticed that his ability to do that has been significantly impacted. That's one of his goals in his IEP, is to encourage him to contribute to conversation, to share opinions, to advocate when he needs something. And this extreme isolation has deeply impacted Chris's verbal ability. Thank goodness they have each other. I had to seek out an additional person to sit with Chris, albeit that person is not a trained therapist. As a BII would be a trained therapist and would be trained in skills specific to Christopher's needs. This person does, however, help by facilitating communication between that person and Chris, which can't be replicated in Zoom. So she is somewhat of an intermediary. But honestly, up until 2 weeks ago when she started, I had been doing this by myself, and it's just not sustainable. It's not sustainable because no one is capable of giving 100% to 3 people 100% of the time. She started 2 weeks ago, so mid-September. It's taken that long to get someone. And that was not provided by the school district. That was provided by Regional Center, which is a completely independent nonprofit organization that Chris and Zach are receiving services through as needed. They've been great at providing that person. But the therapist, the BII, should be the one providing the therapies. So it's as if you were having someone that was going to teach you a foreign language go through 2 other people to do that and not be physically with you. It's really counterproductive to what you're trying to accomplish with a BII. The BII is there to assist with behavioral interventions that can only be intervened with if you are there with that person. So it's like providing therapy through a 3rd person, essentially.
When you have social distance learning, ideally you would still get those services, especially when they're legally required by an IEP or BII. But what we're seeing is that's not the case, that these parents are left with just the computer screen in their houses. It's just the child and the computer screen, and the only assistance is the parent. The parents there having to deal with the behavioral problems, having to deal with the social problems and the emotional problems, in addition to all the other issues, because these are services that can't really be provided through a screen. So although ideally we would have that, even with social distance learning, we're not seeing that in practice. We're seeing these families left behind with nobody to help implement their IEP or their BII. But there are ways that these schools can give those services. But for example, in LA, with LA Unified School District, they're not even allowing these assistants to come to these houses and to help. Even though they're allowed to under Gavin Newsom's plan, because there are certain things that the plan allows for students with IEP and BIIs. There are several parents who have just been desperate for help, and they've looked to all of their options. They tried first through the school district, because that is the entity that's legally required to provide these services. They've also tried other public resources to get an assistant, to get some help and some support. And oftentimes they're met with, we can't do it, our hands are tied. A lot of parents don't have the resources, to go out and hire someone, a private tutor, for example, or a private behavioral interventionalist, because it's a lot, especially when these are the disadvantaged students, the economically disadvantaged, the single moms. They don't have those resources to go and shell out their own money and pay private tutors these big bucks. And again, there's a legal requirement that the school district is supposed to provide these services, but these parents have had no luck going through the school district. And and it also puts these teachers in a tough position, because these are their students and they want to help them. They want to provide the resources for them and see them thrive. And the teachers aren't given the tools or the ability or flexibility to be able to do so. So it really puts everyone in a tough position. And oftentimes it's due to the union, who isn't allowing it, even despite the fact that it's required under the law, despite the fact that there are exceptions to Governor Newsom's shutdown that allow these students to have these resources because they're critical. You have these unions saying no, and it based on their own political reasons that they don't want to provide these services. And the sad effect of this is these kids are suffering academically, socially, mentally, and emotionally, and the parents and teachers are suffering as well. One of the saddest things is hearing a parent talk about what they have to go through, because parenting is an extremely important obligation and responsibility as it is. And then when you add on educating your children when you don't have those tools or resources, on top of cooking dinner, working, cleaning, everything else that a parent has to do, this is taking an extreme toll on their mental health, because they are at max capacity, and they're having to make decisions and to let go of some of their other responsibilities, such as working and providing, in order to be present and to be an educator for their children. And so it puts them in a difficult spot financially and emotionally, just the responsibility that has been placed on them and the lack of support for them to educate their children. We've seen studies from the CDC, from the American Pediatrics Association, that talk about how this is going to negatively affect children's mental health and their development. And these are kids who are in critical stages where they should be learning, they should be socializing and thriving, and yet they're isolated on Zoom all day. And not only does this affect the kids' mental health, but the family dynamic. We've even seen, sadly, child abuse go through the roof, and domestic violence, as these families are put in these tough situations and isolated, and the stress of the finances when one of the parents has to quit their job. If there are two parents at home, one of them has to quit their job in order to be the educator, or having to balance everything. It really is just a storm of negative consequences coming together, and it will have a devastating effect long term, because these issues last, and divorce rates are through the roof as well. And these these situations aren't helping anything. They're just exacerbating the already stressful situations that these families are in. The tone that we're seeing with some of these parents is that they're losing hope in the system that's there, that taxpayers are paying for to educate their children and provide the constitutionally protected right to an equal education. And they're seeing that disintegrate, and that their child's education needs are not met, despite the fact that they've been a strong advocate and they've tried everything they can to get these resources for their children. So they're kind of at their wits' end of what do we do and where do we go from here? And especially with economically disadvantaged families, they're really having to make some tough choices about putting food on their table or about prioritizing their child's education, and no parent should ever have to make that decision between the two. We haven't been able to talk to every parent and see what they're struggling with, but we do know that to one degree or another, every parent really is struggling with this. But it's when we go into the disadvantaged families, the low socioeconomic, these students with special needs, the single moms, minority students, and students who have parents that are living paycheck to paycheck, and this is affecting their parents' income. And when you're living paycheck to paycheck, there's not much room for flexibility or room to not work or take time off. That's where we're seeing just a severe impact that's affecting their quality of life, their mental health, and the academics of their children. Our goal with this lawsuit is to be advocates for those parents, students, and teachers that are struggling during this time. Most importantly, for those students who are not getting the education that is constitutionally required of the state to provide, students who have no other option, no resources, and the parents who cannot pay an attorney to advocate on behalf of their children. And so we're stepping in pro bono to be a voice for them and to do as much as we can to help them learn and thrive and get the resources that they need and that they're legally entitled to. You can join us in advocating for these students and parents and teachers by praying for us first and foremost, keeping these students in your prayers and keeping our staff and lawyers in your prayers as well. You can share this video, subscribe. We're constantly providing updates on our website, so we ask that you please follow that. And lastly, you can donate on our website to help cover the cost of the lawsuit. And we thank you so much for joining us and partnering with us to help these students.